Hi guys, thank you very much for joining me today. Today we're going to take a look at engine bay temperatures, how we can reduce them in a Classic 900. So we're going to be looking at mine, which is a 16 valve turbo from 1991. This one has been Trionic 5.5 converted by a previous owner. It's actually been done very tidily and it's putting out just over 200 horsepower on the dyno. That is a heartbreaker dyno, so probably a little bit more than that, but overall it drives really well and it puts through a fair amount of torque and boost. So because the engine is now under a little bit more strain, it is pushing a little bit more temperature. Also the turbo itself is spinning a little bit faster. It is increasing the temperatures a little bit that we're seeing under the bonnet. I've taken some steps already to mitigate that. Those steps include wrapping certain intake pipe work and making sure that I drive fast enough to keep the air flowing through under the bonnet and keeping things cool. Now underneath the bonnet on this car, it's fairly well laid out. I mean, all of the intake pipe work and all of the airflow is on the left-hand side of the engine bay, and all of the exhaust and turbo is on the right-hand side of the engine bay. Not the most sensible place for any battery, but we're going to see what sort of numbers are developed when we actually test under bonnet temperatures. As you can see, we've got 11-ish degrees Celsius as an ambient, and we're going to start our first test with this. Now it's obviously earlier in the morning, so I'm expecting this to change throughout the day. I've placed the thermocouple just by the throttle body to measure the air which the manifold and the throttle body will be exposed to. This is a fairly spacious area under the bonnet, which is likely to get quickly filled by air from the radiator fan when it engages. So we're going to run up to that temperature to find out what the maximum exposed temperature is. Essentially, this gold pipe is the feed from the turbocharger through the intercooler, then out of the intercooler and into the manifold, so it's an important area to understand temperatures in. Air itself is drawn in here through the airbox and into the turbo via this pipe. Time to start her up. We've now been idling for about 10 minutes and it's nicely warmed up, so it's time to check and see what underbonnet temperatures we're experiencing. So peaking at just over 45.5 degrees before the radiator fan kicks in, starts drawing some cooler air through and lowering it back down to high 30s. In terms of the location for the thermocouple on the exhaust side, you've got to be really careful that you don't allow it to touch anything that physically generates heat. That is going to give you a very unusual reading. It will be much higher than is actually true. We're interested in measuring the ambient air temperature under the bonnet, not the temperature of specific components. But during our test here, you can see that the temperature is far higher on the exhaust side. So even with the bonnet closed, the inlet side is half the temperature of the exhaust side, which is sort of to be expected, but it does go to show actually how well designed that engine bay is. So what we're going to do is we're going to fit a Forge FMTU BL1 turbo blanket and also some wrap to go around the downpipe. The reason for this is to keep the heat contained within the turbine. Now there are lots of reasons why you fit this, why you don't. But you know, we're going for broke here, and we're trying to reduce underbonnet engine temperatures, so all that area is going to get wrapped. This is the wrap we're going to use for the exhaust downpipe itself. We're not going to wrap any part of the manifold, wear gloves as I'm doing. So I've laid the turbo blanket out such that I can pull parts of it through. You need to make sure that your wastegate actuator arm isn't going to be fouling on any part of the blanket, otherwise that could cause you some problems. This is designed for an internal wastegate, as is on the TEO5. Yeah, it comes down to what your preference is in terms of turbo blankets. There are plenty out there. I've used this Forge one before. I'm quite happy to use it again. It comes with a couple of springs, and it just fits quite nicely. Been quite pleased with the quality of it. in the past on a couple of other cars, and as you can see, there's plenty space for that actuator arm to still function freely. With the blanket installed, now it's time to run the wrap around it. I'll be honest, this took me quite a while, and I didn't film the entire experience. It's not a pleasant job. You will end up with itchy fingers for a long time, and you'll probably need somebody to help you out with fitting those metal ties, at least every now and again, to hold it all in place, prevent it from unwinding. But once it's on, it's fairly well on there. It won't need very much adjustment at all. This is also just a cheap universal wrap off eBay. And while we're here, we're going to deal with that battery heat shield. All I've done is basically just cut a sheet of the gold heat reflective tape and stuck it over the existing heat shield. It's a mix of metal and probably asbestos, knowing the era that this car was built in. It could be fibreglass, who knows. I'm not going to eat it or breathe it in. That just simply bolts back down, and it just allows a little bit less of the heat coming off the turbo to interact with the heat shield or interact with the battery. Now that you've wrapped the knuckle there is an element of that wrap that's going to touch the heat shield, so you do have to deal with that. And as I'm demonstrating here, just you need to chop off those extra tangs that are left behind when you are tightening. You can use it by not clipping the end of the tangs off. You can use that tool to just pull it taut a little bit or tighten it up a little bit more before cutting off the tang itself. And clean place is a good place, so just make sure that you remove them from the engine bay. Personally, I'm quite happy with how all that fits. Time for a test. Same location for the thermocouple, and we will run it up to the point at which the radiator fan kicks in. It is slightly warmer today. For those of you who haven't guessed, I did the installation the day after I did the initial temperature checks, and that's for one reason and one reason alone: the fact that wrapping hot exhaust components is not a good idea. So we're dealing with a baseline temperature that is a couple of degrees higher than what it was when we did our initial baseline test. As you can see, our intake side temperatures were already quite a bit lower than they were previously, and I expect the same is going to be true of the exhaust side, so we'll see here. We're now definitely up to temperature, so we're expecting the radiator fan to kick in at any point now. Now I'll be honest, it actually took a lot longer for the engine bay temperature to creep up, but here we are towards the tail end of it after about 5 minutes, 6 minutes of recording. I didn't capture the peak temperature on the video here, but I did capture an image of it. Right, so inlet side temperatures were down over 10 degrees, and bear in mind that in fact the lower temperature was recorded on a slightly warmer day, so the heat wrap is having a huge impact on the temperatures that we're seeing on the intake side of the engine bay, which is great. And really that's caused by the drop in temperatures on the exhaust side, because as you can see we've dropped nearly 30 degrees Celsius on that side, and that's purely down to the exhaust wrap and the turbo blanket. It's an incredibly effective solution to reducing underbonnet temperatures. Just really impressed with this. It's a massive drop, over 30%. One of the main reasons that I did this was to protect the intercooler. It's not exactly in the best position to receive a flow of cold air, so in order to preserve its responsiveness or preserve its ability to support the engine and its required temperatures, it was important to reduce the amount of heat that it was subject to. On the dyno it made 202 horsepower, which was up from its 170 odd that it made initially. And the only changes that I did make were to the map, which is from the Saab Clinic from Paul, the wastegate actuator, but also the heat reduction material that fitted in this video. Overall, I'm super happy with this result, and I definitely recommend you do the same to your car if you're looking to chase any numbers or reduce the temperatures, especially if you're running in a hot climate and trying to push more boost. As ever, thank you very much for watching. If you got this far, congratulations to you. You get a prize. I don't know what it is yet, probably nothing, but a round of applause. Please feel free to like, subscribe, add any comments, anything that you would have done differently, any advice to others. The aim of this is obviously to learn and to share, so welcoming any input.